Russia has held almost total control of the Crimean Peninsula since 2014, when it forcefully annexed the region and claimed it as its own. But Ukraine is battling back. Bit by bit, one strike at a time, it's weakening Russia's stranglehold and slowly but surely liberating its former territory. And if recent reports are accurate, the latest Ukrainian strike on Crimea is one of the biggest and most successful yet. According to a post on the official Security Service of Ukraine (SBU) Telegram account, Ukraine's forces carried out a serious strike on a Russian airbase overnight on June 27 into the early hours of June 28. Their target, the Kirovske airbase, situated towards the eastern edge of Crimea. It's one of several Russian airbases dotted across the peninsula, housing an array of aircraft and other military hardware. The SBU post detailed exactly what happened. Another successful special operation of the SBU, enemy Pantsir S-1 anti-aircraft missile system and 3 helicopters destroyed. The Security Service of Ukraine dealt another painful blow to the occupiers. This time, on the night of June 27-28, Ukrainian Special Service drones attacked the Kirovske military airfield in temporarily occupied Crimea. Damage was inflicted on the locations of the aviation units, air defense systems, ammunition storage depots, as well as reconnaissance and attack UAVs of the enemy. The post doesn't provide much detail about how the attack was carried out. However, multiple news sources suggest that Ukraine relied once more on its increasing mastery of drone warfare for this particular strike, using the cover of darkness to improve its odds of success. The post went on to list Russia's losses. Available data indicate the destruction of multi-purpose and attack helicopters Mi-8, Mi-26 and Mi-28, as well as the Pantsir S-1 self-propelled anti-aircraft missile and gun system. The Mi-8 is the most produced helicopter in the world, with thousands of units in use across various countries. It's very reliable and efficient for transporting troops and supplies from point A to point B, and it's estimated that each unit costs between $10 to $15 million. The Mi-26 is a heavy-lift transporter helicopter, the largest of its kind to enter serial production, and it's been used by the Russian military for decades. Thanks to its huge size, it's very valuable in warfare, since it can carry some large and exceptionally heavy pieces of equipment across vast distances, including mobile ballistic missile systems and armored personnel carriers. Each one is worth around $27 million. The Mi-28 or Havoc helicopter is an anti-armor attack helicopter. Equipped with autocannons and missiles, it has the power to deal some serious damage to both ground and air targets, and even has the capacity to carry and deploy 1,000-pound aerial bombs which could wipe entire buildings and pieces of infrastructure off the map. Each unit costs around $18 million. The final target of Ukraine's strike was the Pantsir S-1 missile system, also known as the SA-22 Greyhound. Russia has used these systems on several occasions and in various strategic locations during the course of the war so far. It's even deployed some of them near important Moscow sites, like the Kremlin itself and the Ministry of Defense, to guard against possible missile attacks. Putin even has one near his Sochi home, which shows just how much Russia relies on this particular piece of hardware, and each unit is around $14 million. In total then, Ukraine may have dealt up to, or perhaps even more than $70 million worth of damage in this drone strike, yet again proving its remarkable capacity to wipe out high-value targets both on Russian soil and in occupied territories like Crimea. What's more, the attack wasn't over yet. The SBU's post continues to note, during the night, a secondary detonation occurred at the enemy airfield. There are no further details about what level of damage was done in that secondary detonation, but either way, this was clearly a highly successful, perfectly planned and ruthlessly executed strike to add to the list of Ukrainian successes in 2025 so far. And it's particularly important for Ukraine's people to see and hear about successes like this in Crimea, as the region represents so much to them. While many people around the world tend to see 2022 as the starting point of the Russia-Ukraine war, it really began almost a decade earlier, in 2014, when President Putin sent soldiers into Crimea to forcefully take control of the peninsula. Special forces troops seized control of government buildings, blockaded military bases, and barred entry to the peninsula from Ukraine, taking the locals by surprise. Russia then installed its own puppet government in the region, holding a so-called referendum to determine its future. According to Russian reports, almost 97% of the population voted to join Russia in that referendum, though it's worth noting that the option to preserve the status quo and leave Crimea as it wasn't even an option on the paper. Additionally, given Russia's history of lies and propaganda, many leaders and people around the world don't believe the reported figures, and the referendum has been declared not only illegal under the constitution of Ukraine, but also invalid in the eyes of NATO. Still, none of that has made Russia relinquish control of the region, and Putin has repeatedly asserted that it belongs to Russia and will not be handed back over. In fact, the Russian president even recently made the bold claim that all of Ukraine should technically belong to Russia, boasting, "I've said it before, Russians and Ukrainians are one people. In this sense, all of Ukraine is ours. There's an old rule that wherever a Russian soldier sets foot, that's ours." To make matters worse for Ukraine, Russia's army has used Crimea as an important and valuable strategic base throughout its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It's moved troops and vehicles to the peninsula, funneling them across the massive Kerch bridge that connects Crimea with the Russian mainland, and pushing them north to take vast swathes of territory in the Ukrainian Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. So, not only have Ukraine's people had to suffer the loss of Crimea, but have also had to watch as Russia turns the territory against them. And that's one of the big reasons why Ukraine's armed forces have seen Crimea as a key target ever since the invasion began. Even while fighting on other fronts in areas like Donetsk and Luhansk, the Ukrainians have always kept Crimea in mind, and from time to time have managed to find enough time and resources to launch strategic strikes on the peninsula, focusing on important logistical landmarks and pieces of infrastructure. Like the Kerch Bridge, for example. Spanning 12 miles, 19 kilometers in total, this is the longest bridge ever built by Russia and cost around $3.7 billion to put together. It's a remarkable feat of engineering and one of President Putin's proudest accomplishments, since it allows for relatively quick and convenient transport of Russian people, cargo, and more to and from Crimea. It's also proved incredibly vital for Russia during the war. On the Ukrainian side, however, the bridge is seen as an ugly symbol of Russia's aggression and oppression, with a former Ukrainian Major General of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Dmitry Marchenko, calling it a viable and primary target as early as June 2022. The Kerch Strait Bridge is target number one for the Ukrainian Armed Forces. This is not a secret either for their military or for our military, neither for their civilians nor for our civilians. Ukraine has since launched no fewer than 3 successful strikes on the bridge, one in 2022, another in 2023, and a third attack quite recently on June 3rd of 2025. The 2022 and 2023 attacks involved explosions that caused pieces of the structure to collapse, putting it out of action for months at a time. The 2025 strike, meanwhile, involved the use of underwater explosives and perhaps even underwater drones to target the bridge's supports, once more plunging the bridge into a state of emergency. The Black Sea port city of Sevastopol, which also happens to be the largest city in Crimea, has also been a recurring target for the Ukrainian armed forces. Drones were reported in the city's skies as early as July 2022, and in late October of that year, Ukraine successfully struck the Sevastopol naval base using a mixture of aerial drones and unmanned surface vehicles. Plumes of black smoke were seen over the city, and the sound of explosions rang out, with Russia's Black Sea Fleet flagship, the Admiral Makarov, suffering serious damages. On numerous other occasions since then, explosions have rocked the Black Sea port, with Ukraine reporting dozens of Russian casualties and impressive amounts of damage to key Russian assets, including warships and even a submarine. Ukraine has even fired missiles at Sevastopol, most notably in Operation Crab Trap in September 2023, in which the Ukrainian armed forces deployed Storm Shadow cruise missiles, dealing massive damage to the headquarters building of the Russian Black Sea Fleet and causing more than 100 casualties. The damage was so bad that Russia even had to shut down and demolish its HQ. Crimean air bases have also been targeted time and time again by Ukraine's armed forces, with each successful strike representing a gradual breakdown of the Russian war machine on the peninsula. The Saki, Belbek and Jankoy air bases, for instance, have all suffered the effects of Ukrainian drone and missile strikes. Saki was rocked in August of 2022, with 7 planes blown up and 3 more damaged. More valuable Russian hardware was damaged in a missile strike on Jankoy in April 2024, when explosions rang out and fires spread across the base. Barely a month later, it was Belbek's turn to feel the heat, with Ukraine's missiles reportedly destroying 2 MiG-31 fighter jets, each worth well in excess of $30 million, along with a missile system and fuel depot. Then there are all the ammunition depots, oil facilities, and other logistical hubs of the peninsula. From 2022 right up to the present day, there has been a long list of reported strikes on these types of targets, like in March 2023, when Ukraine's Ministry of Defense revealed that a batch of Russian caliber KN cruise missiles had been wiped out while being transported on a train across the Crimean peninsula. Or in October 2024, when Ukraine carried out another successful drone strike on a fuel depot in the Feodosia area, leading to large fires and explosions. Even when Russia has set up expensive air defense systems in Crimea to defend its bases and depots against these kinds of attacks, they too have been taken out by Ukraine. In August 2023, for instance, Ukraine's military wiped out a Russian S-400 missile system using one of their domestically made Neptune missiles. A couple of months after that, another air defense system was damaged when Ukraine fired US-made ATACMS missiles into Crimea. This all ties into the larger Ukrainian strategy, which involves a heavy focus on high-value Russian targets and pieces of infrastructure. Whether it's in Crimea, other occupied areas of Ukraine, or on Russian soil in regions like Kerch, the Ukrainian armed forces have time and time again focused on identifying the types of targets that will deal the biggest blow to the Russian military machine. Oil depots, production plants, energy facilities, railway lines, bridges, air bases, and so on. These are the types of targets Ukraine tends to strike, and it's easy to see why, as the benefits are numerous. For one thing, these targets tend to be high value, so even using relatively cheap drones, like those used in the Operation Spiderweb attack, Ukraine can deal millions of dollars worth of damage, or even billions in its biggest and most successful strikes like Spiderweb. That all has a huge impact on the Russian economy, which is already in a perilous position, with even Russian bank bosses and the country's finance minister recently warning about a nationwide recession. Ukraine also tends to demonstrate incredibly cost-effective use of the equipment at its disposal in these kinds of attacks. Recent figures, shared by Ukraine's Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky, reveal that the country has dealt an estimated $10 billion worth of damage to Russia in drone strikes alone. Even more impressively, Ukraine has only spent $1 of its own money for every $15 of damage done to Russia. That's a 15-to-1 ratio in favor of the Ukrainian armed forces. Another big reason behind Ukraine's careful selection of its targets is that these locations tend to play important roles in fueling and maintaining Russia's war effort. Air bases, for example, house valuable jets, helicopters, drone swarms, and missile systems that Russia uses to target Ukraine. Oil depots provide fuel for vehicles. Factories produce important pieces of military hardware. Bridges and railway lines connect cities and regions across Russia and into Ukraine, allowing for the rapid transport of ammo, weapons, and more to the front lines. Every time Ukraine destroys or damages a target like this, it can create numerous problems for Russia, weakening its military position, causing chaos and disruption behind enemy lines, and forcing Russian commanders to rethink, readjust, and adapt their plans accordingly. For Ukraine, it's all a matter of causing as many problems for Russia as it possibly can, in as many different places as possible, not just at the front, but deep in enemy territory too, as it all puts more pressure on Putin and makes it harder for him to get what he wants. As the SBU itself explains, the SBU is systematically working to reduce the Russian Federation's capabilities to carry out air and bombing strikes on the territory of Ukraine. The occupiers must realize that their expensive military equipment and ammunition are not protected anywhere, neither at the front line, nor in temporarily occupied territories, nor in the enemy's deep rear. And the effects of these strikes are well and truly being felt within the Kremlin and all over Russia. Not only is the economy crumbling, but the country also recently crossed the ugly milestone of more than 1 million casualties, with countless Russian mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, and wives grieving the losses of their husbands. Russia's rates of territorial gain in many regions are also incredibly slow, with some experts suggesting it would take literally decades for the country to achieve its aims and win the war, and various reports have also emerged stating that the country is running out of equipment, including weapons and ammo, as well as tanks and other important vehicles. One strike at a time, Ukraine's efforts are adding up, and even as the country prioritizes more ferocious frontline battles in areas like Sumy and Kharkiv, it still clearly wants to keep up the pressure in Crimea. The latest attack comes in the wake of an even bigger strike conducted over the course of May 2nd and 3rd. That attack, said to be one of the largest ever Ukrainian strikes on Crimea, involved the use of more than 250 strike drones, plus a swarm of surface drones and around a dozen missiles, including both Storm Shadows and Neptunes. It targeted both Crimea and the nearby Russian coastal area of Krasnodar Krai. Of course, many of the drones were shot down, but some appeared to strike their targets. Multiple fires and explosions were recorded in various locations across the peninsula, like the air bases of Saki and Jankoy, and data from NASA showed multiple military sites on fire in the wake of the attack. What's more, one of the surface drones did manage to shoot down a Russian Su-30 SM fighter jet using a US-made Sidewinder missile. This in of itself was a notable victory and a major milestone, as it was the first recorded example of a jet being taken out by a surface drone. With that strike taking place in May, and this most recent one in June, it seems that Ukraine is more than capable of launching major attacks on Crimea, in addition to its many other targets, at least once a month. It simply remains to be seen how and where they'll strike next, and how much damage will be done when that happens. And that should strike fear into the heart of Putin, who is so desperate to maintain his grip on the peninsula. Of course, even with all these impressive attacks, Ukraine is highly unlikely to take back any kind of control in Crimea anytime soon. It's fighting on numerous other fronts and can't afford to dedicate too much of its time or resources to the peninsula. Plus, there are large sections of occupied land in places like Kherson and Zaporizhia that essentially give Russia a buffer zone between Crimea and mainland Ukraine. However, by carrying out repeated successful strikes on the region, Ukraine is sending a clear message, letting the Russians know they shouldn't get too comfortable or start to feel at home in Crimea, as it isn't their land and Ukraine will not stop fighting to regain it. Putin has expressed a strong desire to maintain control of the region in any future peace or ceasefire deal with Ukraine. But Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, strongly opposes that view and will not simply sign away entire pieces of his country to an aggressive invader. Instead, if Ukraine can keep up the pressure, not just in Crimea but elsewhere along the front lines and in Russian territory, then it could be Putin who ends up backing down. And perhaps someday, Crimea might finally be liberated once and for all. Now, learn more about Ukraine's recent and ongoing military success in our in-depth look at the country's innovative and strategic use of drone warfare. Or check out our recent report into Russia's Air Force in crisis. And make sure to subscribe to our reliable news channel too for regular informative updates from the front lines of the Russia-Ukraine conflict and other important events around the world.